About this, CNN legal analyst Laura Coates, a former federal prosecutor, and CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Danny Cevallos. So I want to, you heard that tape. I mean, it's a struggle to speak after it. And I wonder, as the jury has heard this, there's no question about whether Dylann Roof did this. He has no remorse. What are his chances for avoiding, after what we would expect almost to be a open and shut verdict here of guilty, for avoiding a death penalty? Well,
I agree, Brianna. The fact that you could hear that woman's fear and being so palpable with Miss Polly Shepard was just heartbreaking to hear. And I think one of the things that Nick Valencia pointed out was that you had jurors who were tearing up and grimacing when they saw pictures of the damage that was done of the massacre. And while that is one thing we're talking about, it's also very, very key to the death penalty phase, because it only takes one juror in a federal trial to say they do not want the person to get the death penalty. It must be unanimous. And when you have people on a jury who, although they've already been screened to figure out if they are willing to consider both life without parole and also the death penalty, you will find a huge population of people who have such a visceral reaction to death that they will and may not actually find death penalty appropriate, and even in this case.
No, we don't, of course, Danny Cevallos, want to say that this is a foregone conclusion, but as far as cases go, it is in a way, because this is not a whodunit. We know who did this. It's not about whether he's going, it's not about whether or not he did this. It's about whether he's going to get the death penalty. And Dylann Roof wants to represent himself during the sentencing phase. How does that play out? What impact does that have?
What impact? It's going to be really, really bad for this defendant. And while I wouldn't normally make a prediction, I think we can safely, at least I would safely say, we can expect a guilty verdict. And for that reason, his defense attorneys have to be realistic for that exact reason. When it comes to jury selection, this is the same jury in the liability phase that will be sentencing him. So they have to look ahead to that probable sentencing phase and choose jurors who they hope would be likely to be that one holdout. And the reason that Dylann Roof representing himself in the sentencing phase may be even more damaging to him than having counsel, than switching if he had done it during the liability phase, is because sentencing, mitigation, these things are so critical during the sentencing phase. The rules of evidence don't apply. It's so critical to get in as much information and investigation about this defendant's life to convince one juror that his life is worth saving. This is not the phase to go without counsel.
But he doesn't want to die, though. That is what is, at least not now, right? When he was going through this process, he and his attorneys took steps to try to get the death penalty off the table.
Right, and how ironic that Dylann Roof, a man who went and executed these 9 people at a Bible study, and as he talked about in his confession, was prepared to kill himself in a shootout with police after he left the church and was in awe that no one was outside to kill him or tried to kill him, has repeatedly asked for a plea offer that did not include the death penalty because he himself does not want to die. But in this case, and Danny is right about this, the verdict is kind of a foregone conclusion of actual guilt. But the one holdout we're all talking about is you've got to bank on the fact that there is one person who had that visceral reaction to seeing death in front of their eyes during the trial, will not want to impose that on somebody else. And the attorneys already planted a seed, Brianna. They've already said, ask yourselves why he did this, not whether, but why. They want to plant the seed that there's something wrong, obviously, with Dylann Roof, that will actually be mitigating enough for them to say he, even though he did this horrible act, does not meet the standard for a death penalty in this case.
How is he convincing in that way, though, Danny? How, someone who doesn't have remorse, how will he convince jurors that they should spare his life?
Mitigation at the capital sentencing phase is very complex, often just as complex as the liability phase. You have to hire experts. You have to have investigators dig into your life as a defendant and find all of the horrible things that happened to you to garner any kind of sympathy. This person had a bad family life. He had an awful experience, and that's what may have contributed to this person you see today. And you should have sympathy for him and spare him this ultimate punishment. It's such an important phase that it usually requires the assistance of not only attorneys, but investigators and specialists in mitigation.
So that's the case he would have to make. He'll be representing himself. And the jury in this case is death penalty qualified,
Right.
Laura. What does that mean?
It means that at the onset of the case, when they chose jurors to find they're actually impartial and could be fair, they look ahead to figure out, are you somebody who could consider the death penalty as a possibility, not a foregone conclusion? And both the prosecution and the defense have an interest in making sure that people are very centrist in their viewpoints and say that they will not always impose the death penalty or that they would never impose. They want somebody in the middle ground. But studies have shown what often happens in any death-qualified jury panel is that they're often pro-prosecution and can tend to be very much less like the impartial jury you will see of the community of your peers and much more somebody who would think seriously about imposing the death penalty. So I think you do have that expectation. But remember, people on death penalty and death row for years, decades. It goes through appeals. It's not an automatic sentence that actually gets imposed instantly. And this will be heartbreaking. Even if he gets the death penalty, they'll have to relive this through appeals.
How long this will continue. All right, Laura Coates, Danny Cevallos, thank you so much to
Thank
both
you.
of you.